two of the largest single-site aluminum smelters on the planet, Aluminium Bahrain, known as Alba, and Emirates Global Aluminium in the UAE, are currently experiencing catastrophic structural collapse. Let's look at the exact timeline we just decoded from open source intelligence. This is not a random skirmish. This is the brutal mathematics of asymmetric warfare. This is how a core strategic supply chain, the absolute backbone of the Western war machine, gets decapitated in exactly 120 minutes. At 1:14 a.m. local time, over-the-horizon radars register a massive swarm of small thermal signatures launching from camouflaged coastal batteries. Dozens of Shahed-136 UAVs begin their vector. They are flying at exactly 50 meters above sea level. This is a nap of the Earth flight profile, keeping them completely under the radar horizon of Patriot PAC-3 interceptors. Fast forward to 2:30 a.m. Radar operators across the UAE and Bahrain scramble. Their screens suddenly light up with dozens of low-cost trash targets. The Shahed swarm splits into two distinct prongs, diving straight for the critical power grids surrounding Alba and EGA. The multi-billion-dollar defense grid reacts exactly how the enemy calculated. Short-range air defenses are forced to engage, draining highly expensive limited-supply interceptor tubes just to swat down $20,000 fiberglass drones. By 2:42 a.m., just as the American-made steel umbrella is stretched to its absolute processing limit and batteries are scrambling to reload, the real kinetic strike arrives. Early warning satellites catch a massive infrared bloom from mobile launchers deep inside enemy mountain terrain. Fateh-110 tactical ballistic missiles leave their silos. They are solid-fueled, providing zero early warning time, tearing through the stratosphere at Mach 3. 5 minutes later, missile stage separation occurs. But these are not standard unitary high-explosive warheads. Thousands of submunitions from a cluster payload deploy, creating a synchronized steel rain over dozens of hectares of the industrial facility. Catastrophic structural damage is confirmed across critical substations and exposed cooling pipelines. The grid goes completely dark. You are being spoon-fed sanitized damage reports by officials trying to prevent a global market meltdown. But the LME ticker doesn't lie. This is the reality unfolding on the tactical board. Let's deconstruct the hardware. How does a multi-billion-dollar air defense grid get completely penetrated in under 2 hours? The answer lies in a brutal symphony of two highly asymmetric weapons designed specifically to break the mathematics of Western defense doctrines. First, the Shahed-136 UAV swarm. Do not underestimate this platform simply because it is cheap. The media mocks its engine for sounding like a lawnmower, but in a saturation strike, they are the absolute perfect breachers. Their low speed and nap-of-the-earth flight profile force advanced systems like the THAAD's X-band radar to constantly recalculate hundreds of distinct shifting trajectories. This is a deliberate tactical maneuver to exhaust the processing capacity of the combat crew and the tracking hardware. When a radar system is forced to paint 50 separate, slow-moving targets simultaneously, the algorithms are stretched to their absolute breaking point. More importantly, it forces the defense network to open its silos. A single Patriot PAC-3 MSE interceptor costs roughly $4 million. A Shahed costs $20,000. When a defense commander is staring at a radar screen full of inbound thermal signatures heading directly for a critical energy grid, they have no choice but to fire. They are mathematically forced to empty their magazines, trading millions of dollars in highly advanced interceptors for a few $1,000s of fiberglass. Once the interceptor tubes run dry and the reload trucks are scrambling, the airspace is entirely unprotected. That brings us to the decisive blow, the Fateh-110 tactical ballistic missile. The Fateh-110 is a solid fuel platform. Unlike liquid-fueled missiles that take hours to prep, leaving a massive thermal footprint, a solid fuel system is pulled from a subterranean mountain bunker, erected on a mobile transporter, and fired in under 10 minutes. There is zero early warning time. By the time the infrared launch signature is verified by orbital sensors, the missile is already outside the atmosphere, preparing to re-enter at Mach 3. But what makes the brutality of this specific campaign so catastrophic for the global supply chain is the payload selection. They did not use standard high-explosive warheads. For a sprawling industrial complex like Alba or EGA, dropping a single massive bomb on an administrative building is strategically meaningless. Instead, the Fateh-110s were specifically equipped with cluster munitions. As the missiles breached the terminal phase, they executed a synchronized stage separation directly over the facilities. A cluster warhead disperses hundreds of individual submunitions, initiating a devastating, widespread airburst. Their target was not concrete, it was the miles of highly exposed cooling pipes, the fragile high-voltage substations, and the massive electrical transmission cables. The cluster bomblets shredded the facility's power infrastructure in a matter of seconds. Once the Shahed swarm bled the air defenses dry and blinded the radars, the Fateh-110s dove in through the gaps, securing the target neutralized status and plunging the world's largest smelters into total, irreversible darkness. Now let us translate the physics of this tactical strike into the brutal reality of global economics. Why target aluminum? Why not launch this massive coordinated swarm at a naval base? This is the cold, calculated mindset of modern asymmetric warfare. The enemy is not looking for a glorious cinematic dogfight in the sky. They are executing a decapitation strike against the economic artery and the absolute foundation of the Western defense supply chain. Aluminum production is an energy-devouring monster. The smelting pot lines at facilities like Alba and EGA consist of thousands of massive reduction cells, operating continuously at nearly 1,000 degrees Celsius. To keep the metal in a molten state, these pot lines require a continuous, uninterrupted, high-amperage electrical current, running 24 hours a day. It is a highly fragile equilibrium of extreme heat and massive electrical power. This brings us to the 4-hour death window. If you sever the power supply to an aluminum smelter for more than 4 to 5 hours, the liquid metal inside the pots begins to freeze. It solidifies into an immovable block of solid rock. You cannot simply flip the power switch back on when the electrical grid is eventually repaired. The thermal shock and expansion completely destroy the intricate carbon linings of the pots from the inside out. The infrastructure is permanently dead. To fix it, you have to bring in heavy machinery and literally dynamite the solidified metal out of thousands of individual cells. You have to rebuild the entire multi-billion-dollar system from scratch. It takes years, not weeks. By using cluster munitions to systematically shred the substations, the Fateh-110 strike guaranteed that Alba and EGA would freeze over. They didn't just damage the plants, they killed them. The global financial markets immediately understood the assignment. The London Metal Exchange went into absolute panic mode this morning. Paper contracts for aluminum futures shattered historical ceilings. But the screen price is just a number. The real crisis is in the physical supply. The LME vaults never fully refilled after the previous supply chain crunches. With EGA and Alba taken offline, millions of metric tons of global capacity just vanished from the earth. This is the ultimate kill shot, because high-purity aluminum is the absolute backbone of the Western war machine. You cannot build a modern military without it. The aerospace-grade aluminum alloys required for the skeletal structure and stealth skin of the F-35 Lightning II? The assembly lines will starve. The armor plating and chassis components for infantry fighting vehicles? Stalled. The casings for 155mm artillery shells and the fins for precision-guided munitions? They all require the exact raw materials that were just neutralized in the Persian Gulf. Crippling these mega smelters is a direct, calculated strike on the coalition's capacity to regenerate weaponry. The adversary realized they do not need to shoot down an American fighter jet in the sky. They just destroyed the military-industrial complex's ability to build that jet in the cradle. The politicians and defense contractors told you that the Patriot and THAAD batteries created an impenetrable fortress. They sold this narrative to secure billions in continuous funding. But the battlefield this morning is screaming the absolute impotence of an obsolete defensive doctrine. Look at the sheer absurdity of the Pentagon's recent intelligence briefings. For months, they pounded their chests, claiming the adversary had completely depleted their precision arsenal. So, a critical question must be asked to the strategic analysts sitting in air-conditioned rooms in Washington. How is a heavily sanctioned, supposedly isolated nation able to perfectly synchronize a massive combined UAV and tactical ballistic missile strike from hundreds of kilometers away? How did they calculate the time on target down to the exact millisecond required to crash the processing core of the most advanced air defense networks on the planet? The truth is, the military elites are desperately trying to cover up a colossal intelligence blind spot with statistical sleight of hand. When a defense spokesperson stands at a podium and brags about a 99% interception success rate, they are lying to you through omission. In the brutal mathematics of asymmetric warfare, The return on investment is the only metric that dictates survival. Intercepting a wave of cheap, expendable decoys is not a strategic victory. It is a catastrophic financial defeat. When a $4 million Patriot interceptor missile is mathematically forced by automated defense protocols to chase a $20,000 fiberglass drone, the defense grid is essentially bankrupting itself in real time. The United States simply cannot manufacture PAC-3 interceptors fast enough to replace the ones wasted on lawnmower engines. Production lines are already strained, and now, without the aluminum supply from the very plants they failed to protect, the restocking effort is paralyzed. The adversary understands that Western military doctrine relies on overwhelming technological superiority, but they also know that this superiority is highly fragile and deeply inflexible. In a real theater-level escalation, when the enemy utilizes mass-produced swarms strictly as decoys to bleed the silos dry, and follows up with solid-fueled cluster munitions as the ultimate finisher, the multi-billion-dollar shield simply goes blind. The sky is left wide open for ballistics to rain down on the economic hubs that actually sustain the war effort. Politicians will always lie to stabilize the markets and protect their defense contracts. But the unexploded cluster submunitions and the twisted melted shrapnel currently embedded in the smoldering substations of Alba and EGA tell the absolute, undeniable truth. Based on spectral satellite data and the logistical footprints tracked over the last 12 hours, the board is set, and the Western alliance is entirely out of position. Here is exactly what is about to happen on the tactical map within the next 48 hours. The first vector is a fatal redeployment. The absolute panic radiating from the financial elite and the global energy sector will force Western generals to immediately relocate their remaining depleted air defense batteries. They will pull THAAD and Patriot systems away from forward military bases to protect highly vulnerable oil refineries, desalination plants, and the few surviving industrial zones. This is the classic maneuver of pulling the blanket to cover your head while completely exposing your feet. By rapidly shifting the defensive umbrella to protect civilian economics, they will create wide-open, unprotected death corridors in the regional airspace. This clears the direct, uncontested path for the second wave, which will not target aluminum. It will target the C4ISR command and control communication nodes that manage the entire theater of war. The second vector is blind retaliation. The politicians desperately need a strategic win for the cameras. There will be massive, highly publicized retaliatory airstrikes, so the cable networks have cinematic footage of explosions to broadcast to the public. But they will only be dropping million-dollar bunker-busting munitions on cheap inflatable decoys, abandoned desert warehouses, and empty sand. The real Fateh-110 mobile launchers, the precise units that executed the kill shot on EGA and Alba, have already displaced. They retreated deep into subterranean reinforced mountain tunnel networks within 3 minutes of firing, making them entirely immune to orbital tracking and precision kinetic strikes. The third vector is a global logistics shock. The physical shortage will hit the assembly lines immediately. Aluminum futures will not just shatter historical ceilings, they will permanently break the pricing models. Global defense contractors will be forced to declare a Tier 1 materials state of emergency. You cannot surge weapon delivery contracts for the front lines, and you cannot replace the expended Patriot missiles, when the high-purity raw material pipeline has been fundamentally severed at the root. The American war machine will effectively stall out in a matter of weeks as the existing stockpiles evaporate. We are not here to listen to pacifying speeches or sanitized press releases from desperate generals. We are here to read the raw data and the brutal mathematics of war. So I have 3 tactical questions for the analysts in the war room today. First, the radar blind spot. Why did a multi-billion-dollar AWACS early warning system let dozens of Shahed drones penetrate the air defense identification zone until they were practically on top of the critical infrastructure? Second, the doctrinal failure. Who exactly in the chain of command is responsible for the rigid automated rules of engagement that allowed long-range $4 million interceptors to be systematically wasted on low-flying decoys, instead of mandating that combat crews hold reserve ammunition for the inevitable ballistic threat? And finally, the liars. With glaring infrared data from European Space Agency satellites confirming catastrophic structural collapse, which coalition official will face a court-martial for reporting insignificant damage just to manipulate the financial markets this morning? Leave your tactical analysis in the comments below. If you want to see through the fog of war and refuse to be blinded by the mainstream media, subscribe. We don't count rumors. We count missile debris and shattered supply chains. See you on the next tactical map.